Friends, hello everyone. Today we're going to dive into one of the hottest and most mysterious topics of recent weeks, which revolves around one of the most famous figures in Ukraine, General Valerii Zaluzhnyi. Like you, I'm probably already tired of these, roller coasters. As soon as we heard that Zaluzhnyi was leaving his post as ambassador to the UK, he's already being rumored to be offered the position of either prime minister or the head of the president's office. But then, a few hours later, it turns out none of it is true. He's staying, everything is immediately denied, and then it's discussed millions of times over. A photo with the caption, like, "It's better at home," just as Valery Fedorovich did when he returned to Ukraine. A political article, some subtext, the removal of Yermak, a bunch of conspiracy theories. So what is really happening? Why does such an information storm always arise around the figure of Zaluzhnyi? He really might get a new responsible position. Or could all this be preparation for a political career and elections? Well, or maybe friends were just, looking too closely at every detail about Zaluzhnyi and building our own theories out of nothing. Let's break everything down together. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, and so as not to waste your time, I'll get started right away. And it all started with a breaking news story from Radio NV. This outlet refers to its 4 sources in political and diplomatic circles and claims the following. Here's the gist. First, Valerii Zaluzhnyi is allegedly preparing to step down from his post as ambassador to the United Kingdom. Second, a few weeks ago, he discussed this with President Zelensky in Kiev, and supposedly various options for his return were considered, from the position of prime minister to the head of the president's office. But at that time, Zaluzhnyi reportedly did not show any interest, according to journalists. There were other ideas, like becoming ambassador to the US, or even returning to the post of commander-in-chief of the armed forces, but no decisions have been made. The key point is that sources suggested he might announce his resignation very soon, on January 4th or January 5th. And that would have been a bombshell. Makes sense? Well, it actually makes a lot of sense. Listen, Zaluzhnyi was sent as ambassador when he was removed from the post of commander-in-chief. It was an elegant way to sideline a popular general from the military political arena. But if he's leaving diplomacy, it means something is changing. But friends, we didn't have to wait long. Zaluzhny's media advisor, Oksana Toropa, quickly gave a comment to the media, and it was categorical. Nothing is changing. The ambassador of Ukraine to Britain is not being replaced. Valerii Zaluzhnyi remains in his position and continues to work for the state. As she said, as always, unnamed sources know everything, but nothing has changed. And so it turns out that we are witnessing a classic situation. A journalistic investigative piece versus the official denial from Zaluzhny's team. Who should we believe? Sources close to the president's office or the official representative of Zaluzhnyi himself? Well, but let's be honest, as we say here in Ukraine, there's no smoke without fire. And this smoke, in fact, started rising back in December, friends. Because it all began, it would seem, with a sweet and completely ordinary domestic event. In December, Valerii Zaluzhnyi posted a photo with his wife on Facebook and captioned it, "There's no place like home." And that was it. No explanations. But that was enough, because social media literally exploded. Zaluzhnyi returned from London. Was he dismissed or not? He's going back to service. He is being prepared for a position in the president's office, head of the president's office. In other words, there were actually a million versions. Why such a reaction? Because this innocent post overlapped with 2 very serious events. The first event is Zaluzhny's political article. On November 30th, his article was published in the prestigious journal Foreign Affairs. And while previously he mostly wrote about military science, this time it was a broad geopolitical and political statement. He spoke about possible ways to end the war and security guarantees for Ukraine. Most importantly, he criticized the lack of a clear political objective. Let's be honest, there was a clear political subtext in this article. On the one hand, it was criticism, indirect, but still, of the political leadership in the 4th year of the war. On the other hand, it was like a signal to the West. The motivation could have been as follows. If you think it's hard to negotiate with Zelensky, it will be even harder with me. Because for his security guarantees, Zaluzhnyi named joining NATO, the deployment of foreign troops, and nuclear weapons on our territory, and even the collapse of Russia as an empire. In the West, this caused shock, particularly within NATO. Senator Graham called this simply unrealistic, specifically regarding, nuclear weapons. But the signal was still conveyed one way or another. And the second event. This is Yermak's resignation. 2 days before the publication of Zaluzhny's article, it became known about the resignation of the head of the presidential office, Yermak, and here you have a perfect storm. It turns into a chain reaction. First, Zaluzhnyi publishes a political article, a manifesto. Second, one of the most influential people in the country resigns. Third, Zaluzhnyi mysteriously ends up at home and posts about it on Facebook. No wonder conspiracy theorists started connecting the dots, and at the negotiations in Florida, they were discussing the election schedule in Ukraine. Remember? And now the elections are being discussed. Putin says he won't negotiate with the illegitimate Ukrainian government. A theory emerges that both the West and Russia need a more compliant president, so they're pushing for elections. And Zaluzhnyi supposedly could be the one to appear as an alternative. But friends, even earlier in November, another interesting story appeared in the media. The publication Babel then reported that Andriy Yermak urgently flew to London, specifically to meet with Valerii Zaluzhnyi. And supposedly, the goal was to offer the general the position of Prime Minister of Ukraine. Why? Because of internal scandals and declining trust, Bankova wanted to, so to speak, put out the fire by involving the authoritative Zaluzhnyi. However, this information was quickly denied. Member of Parliament Zaluzhnyi, who, as you know, has a lot of insider information, and former MP Borislav Bereza, called this a fake. Later, the publication Babel itself clarified that the trip was cancelled at the last moment. So the fact of a meeting in London has been refuted, but NV sources say that Zaluzhnyi and Zelensky did meet in Kiev. And it was then that various positions were discussed. So there was communication, but without any concrete decisions at that moment. So let's figure it out, friends. What positions were actually discussed, and how realistic are they? First, Prime Minister of Ukraine. It's logical because in the event of a political crisis or the need to change the government, Zaluzhny's figure could have become, so to speak, a universal soldier who would satisfy both the authorities and the opposition in parliament as well as society. The question is, does Zaluzhnyi himself even want this? This is operational economic work, not military work, isn't it? I don't know. Second, the head of the president's office. After Yermak, the position has been vacant and remains vacant, and while many candidates are being considered, Zaluzhny's name only comes up vaguely. Theoretically, the role of strategist and coordinator closer to the president. But again, this is administrative and political work, and the president himself has not mentioned or named Zaluzhnyi among the candidates. Third is the ambassador to the USA. This would be a logical career move from the position in Britain, but sources say that there is no talk of changing the ambassador to the USA. Right now, that's not being discussed. Well, the appointment was made recently, so why change it again? For what reason? Fourth is returning to the position of Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In my opinion, this is the least likely option overall. I don't even know why it's being considered at all. It would simply be an admission of a mistake, the dismissal of Zaluzhnyi a year ago. That's why, in my opinion, no one will go for this option. So the most, so to speak, realistic among all the unrealistic options are actually the political positions. Prime Minister or head of the president's office. But is Zaluzhnyi ready for this? And most importantly, does he even need this at all? Separately, friends, we also need to discuss whether Zaluzhnyi himself wants to go into politics. 2 or 3 months ago, as you know, he himself stated on social media that he is not creating any election headquarters and is not preparing for elections. This was a reaction to a wave of rumors, a strong denial, but ultimately it does not rule out the presence of political ambitions at all. So the question is about timing. Elections are currently impossible due to martial law. No matter how much people discuss it, it's impossible. Once again, I emphasize that I stand by my position. But in the future, well, who knows? But there's another interesting point. Notice how a series of publications appeared that can be seen as an attempt to tarnish Zaluzhny's reputation. Well, for example, Member of Parliament Mariana Bezula posted a photo with him and hinted that the general was vacationing in the Dominican Republic during the war. On TikTok, for instance, as I scroll, I see more and more of this kind of content. All sorts of videos where people are buying the general's book. They open the first page with the phrase, "I will leave Kiev less," and film the whole thing on video. So it looked as if it was an organized campaign. In Ukraine, as you know, these methods are classic for pre-election battles. Zaluzhny's high trust rating, which is one of the highest in the country, let's be honest, makes him a potentially dangerous competitor for any political force. So a logical question arises. Isn't someone trying to undermine his reputation in advance, just in case he decides to enter politics? So friends, what do we have here? First, officially, Zaluzhnyi remains the ambassador to the UK. The denial from his team was clear and swift. Second, after all, where there's smoke, there's fire. A denial, an article with a political subtext, a visit to Kiev, Yermak's dismissal, discussions, positions, even if they didn't actually happen. All of this, friends, doesn't just come out of nowhere. Let's agree, there were consultations somewhere, some probing of possibilities. But it did happen. Third, Zaluzhnyi is, so to speak, a powerful social institution. His authority, a high rating, a military background, all of this makes him a unique figure. And in the event of a deep political crisis, his name will be one of the first to be mentioned, so to speak, to stabilize the situation. But whether he would want that, that's a big question, really. Fourth, elections. Elections are, for now, pure fantasy. Again, I repeat, don't believe all the stories that elections will take place. In wartime conditions, it's almost impossible, although you never know, as they say. So all the theories about Zaluzhnyi as president are a project for the future, not for the present. And fifth, the information campaign against him indicates that someone perceives him as a threat and has for quite some time. And this only confirms his political weight. So friends, what happens next? Here's my opinion. The most likely scenario for the coming months, and I emphasize months, is the status quo. Zaluzhnyi will remain ambassador to the UK. He will continue to do his job, occasionally commenting on important topics through his articles, commentary, and so on. His name will continue to be used in information wars. We as a society and the media sometimes, tend to read between the lines too much and build grand theories out of simple things. Well, someone just came home for the holidays to take care of some matters, to see loved ones, and maybe not just loved ones, maybe other politicians, businessmen, or someone else. But that's normal, one way or another. But the main thing we need to understand is that Zaluzhnyi has long since transformed from being solely a military leader into a significant political and public figure. And as long as he remains in the public eye, in the public sphere, there will always be rumors, theories, and information attacks surrounding him. This is the price of popularity, the price of influence, the price of political weight. Call it whatever you like. What do you think about this, friends? Please write in the comments, in the chat under this video. Thank you for watching until the end. Take care of yourselves and see you next time.